Okay, so it is time for me to recommend some Rioja wines that I think are worth trying. And just before we get into that, just some thoughts on this whole process of tasting a lot of Rioja wines to try to narrow down, a selection that is worth recommending. My first thoughts is that Rioja as a whole in a region is quite overrated. If you live in Spain and you start drinking red wine in Spain, Rioja is usually the first region that you get into. It's the most famous region. They're easy to find. You go to any supermarket wine store in the country, and the biggest selection of wines they'll probably have is from Rioja. And there's a lot of prestige behind the whole system of Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. Other regions even like to use sometimes those words on their labels, even though it's not an official category in that region, to try to attract people towards that wine. Basically, they're saying this wine has been aged in oak for quite a long time, and it gives it sort of an air of elegance. That being said, when you start to drink or try several Rioja wines within those categories, they all pretty much taste the same. They're kind of one note. The oak overpowers the wine, and it, basically tastes like oak. For people that are really into whiskeys and that kind of hard liquors, then those are wines that are probably right up your alley. For every once in a while, I think it's appropriate when they're well made. They're definitely worth it. I'm not trying to say that there are no worthwhile Riojas within those categories. But the region produces so much wine. There are more wineries in Rioja than anywhere else in Spain. The production or the amount of wine that they make is crazy. So it's actually quite an effort within that, crazy volume of wine to actually find things that are worthwhile and that are different. I think we're able to do that. We've narrowed it down to 4 wines that we think are worth trying. So let's get into it. So the first wine that I want to recommend is El Aceta or LZ by Telmo Rodriguez. Telmo is pretty much the best winemaker in Spain at the moment. He's produced more than one wine this year that received 100 points by James Suckling in his annual wine reviews. It's extremely difficult to get 100 points. This is not one of those. This is one of the more entry-level wines that he makes, but it's delicious. It's a blend of Tempranillo, Graciano, and Grenache grapes, not aged in oak at all. It's a young wine. It's very fresh. There's a lot of fruit, although it's also very elegant. It's quite light-bodied for being a Rioja. It's very pleasant and definitely worth trying. It punches way above its weight. It comes in at around 11, 12 euros, depending on where you buy it. It's a very affordable wine, and so that's our wine at number 1. So the second wine I'm recommending is Pies Negros by Bodegas Artuque. This is a generico wine. In fact, all the wines I'm recommending have the generico label on it. Probably not a surprise. At the beginning I said I'm a little bit tired of the Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva wines. Generico wines don't necessarily mean that there is no oak. However, there's usually a lot less oak and the wines are, fruitier, more fresh, which is also the case with this wine. It's got a little more body than El Aceta, but it's still a moderately to lighter bodied wine compared to most Riojas. It's also a blend of Tempranillo and Graciano grapes. It's aged partially in steel tanks and then finished off in oak barrels, but just for a short amount of time. So this wine comes in at around 13 euros and is definitely worth checking out. The third wine I'm recommending is Senderos de Ucán from Ucán Winery. This wine is the one that most resembles your typical, Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva wine. But having said that, out of all the ones I tried, it is by far the best. It is generico, so that means that they've used different techniques and aged it for a different amount of time than what is, officially allowed within those labels. And so probably a little more creativity and thought went into making this wine than just following the standard instructions that a lot of Rioja wines do. It's much fuller bodied, it's a stronger wine in flavor, however lower in alcohol than what a Rioja wine typically is, coming in at 13.5% alcohol, whereas usually a Rioja wine and most Spanish wines will go in between 14 to 15.5% alcohol, so they're very strong. The flavors are there, they're very bold, but very balanced. And there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more fruit as well as the oak, which is, noticeable, but there's just a hint of it instead of it being the main flavor in the wine, which is why we picked this wine at number 3. And finally, the last wine that I'm recommending today is Predicador 2018 from Bodegas Contador. It's the best wine that I tried out of all the Riojas that I tasted over the past few weeks. It's super elegant. It's very smooth. It's very silky. It approaches what a fine wine is. Honestly, it's amazing. Coming in at 23 euros, punches way above its weight. It drinks like a €100 bottle, in my opinion. It's becoming very popular in Spain among, wine nerds, people that are really into wine are, really enjoying this bottle. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years, with good vintages, the price will start to go up. It'll be much more in demand. So my recommendation is get your hands on a few bottles now, store them, stash them whilst they're affordable. And, you can pull one out for a celebration, for a party, for, any occasion where you want to impress your guests. This is definitely the wine that you should try. So that's it for our Rioja recommendations. In the next few weeks, we'll be expanding our content to a lot more regions in Spain, talking about different and unique wines in the country. So stay tuned for those.